The Senate Majority and Minority Leader drew their battle lines this morning for what could be a historic week in American politics. The chance of stopping a Supreme Court nominee by partisan filibuster, or the Senate breaking with its time-honored tradition of a 60-vote threshold to break it. Let's bring in our political panel for a fair and balanced debate. Alex Kanninen, Republican strategist, former communications director for Marco Rubio's 2016 presidential bid, and Dan Kanninen, principal at the Smoot Twos Group and veteran of the Clinton and Obama campaigns. Gentlemen, great to see you.
Good afternoon.
Good to be here.
Dan, give us the calculation for some Democrats, especially those who are in the 10 states that Trump won, that they're coming up in 2018 for re-election, and still they say, I'm going to be an obstructionist.
Well, I'm not sure they're saying that, Leland. I think they're thinking that, we made a big case in 2016 that there'd be a big political price to pay if you didn't confirm Merrick Garland under even more, I think, from the Democratic point of view, absurd circumstances. And you can't make the case in retrospect that any Republicans really lost their seats because they didn't even have a hearing on Mr. Garland. So I think in this case, they're thinking that the base for the Democrats is activated in the same way the Republican base was activated in 2010. Anything that comes from this president, from Mr. Trump, given all the questions about Russia, all the questions about the agenda he wants to push, is going to come with a higher price. And I think that they understand that they need to be holding him accountable, and that they will be held accountable to their base on the left.
All right, so Alex, that's the Democrats' calculation. What is Mitch McConnell's calculation when it comes to breaking the filibuster rule, in common parlance, going nuclear?
Well, twofold. One is there's never been a 60-vote threshold for a Supreme Court nominee in the past. In fact, there are two members of the Supreme Court right now, Alito and Thomas, who were confirmed with less than 60 votes. They both had more than 50, but less than 60 votes. So they're trying to set a new standard by saying that this nominee now needs to achieve 60 votes, and I think McConnell is calling them out on that. The second thing is that this will likely not be the last nominee, Supreme Court nominee, that Donald Trump gets to appoint. And the next one could very well change the balance of the court. So let's go ahead and pull the nuclear option now to get rid of the filibuster rule, so that for the next one, the political cost isn't as high and we can nominate whomever we want.
That can play both ways, of course, Dan, in the sense that that may work great for Republicans this time around. It may not work so great for Republicans if all of a sudden they're in the minority come 2018.
Well, that's the obvious point. I think it's totally true that Republicans aren't going to control the Senate for forever and may not have it in 2 years. But there's another more inside point, I think, and that's the fact that Mitch McConnell now can certainly talk tough and be in basic alignment with Paul Ryan and with Donald Trump on big issues. But Mitch McConnell doesn't want the Freedom Caucus telling his chamber, his body, what to do. And sometimes that 60-vote threshold can help a majority leader from stopping things before it gets to the chamber, or having a very rational excuse for not moving forward on something that is a requirement on the far right. All of a sudden, the Freedom Caucus is going to push Paul Ryan to get things through their House, which will get to the Senate. And if there isn't that 60-vote threshold on legislation, Mitch McConnell is going to have maybe a tough spot to hold that line in between Donald Trump and the House.
And that brings us to where we are right now. And by right now, I mean right now, as President Trump is out this Sunday at his golf course, about 30 miles from the White House, with none other than Rand Paul, sort of the most vocal member of the United States Senate that spoke out against the health care bill. And this goes now to Alex. You think about what's coming up here for this president. You've got big hearings on the wall and on immigration that is a signature part of his campaign. You've got a possible government shutdown coming on. You've got tax reform that he wants to push through, and still he says he's not giving up on health care. Is this reach out to, shall we say, a certain part, perhaps you could say fringe of the Republican Party, the right way to go about this, or should he hook dogleg left and take up with the Democrats?
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt, but it's not going to. But simply going and playing a round of golf with Rand Paul is not going to make all of Donald Trump's political problems disappear overnight. We only have a 2-vote majority in the U.S. Senate. That is very narrow, especially when you're talking about doing big, complicated things like health care reform or overhauling the tax code. I think April will be a pivotal month for Donald Trump's presidency. Even though it's young, even though his presidency is still very young, March was a disaster. April April, he can get some things done. He can get a Supreme Court nominee confirmed, as we just discussed, and he can fund the government at the end of the month. If he can do those two things, he'll have some momentum coming out of April.
Yeah, well, the political version of April showers bringing May flowers. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Always good to see you guys.
Thank you.
All right, have a great Sunday.
Thanks.